Hi, my name is Janosch Haber and I work on lexical ambiguity, which are words that have different interpretations and how these are represented in our brain and in computational language models. I specifically focus on polysemes. Polysemes are words with multiple distinct but related senses, like for example, the school is on fire and the school called Tom's parents. The school building is on fire and the school receptionist called Tom's parents. An interesting question that these kind of words invoke is how are they represented in our mental lexicon, in our mental dictionary? How is it that if we encounter the word school, these different interpretations are available to us, and it's fine to interpret these sentences that continue in different ways? One of the most common traditional views to explain this is that polyseme senses are stored in a single unspecified entry in our mental lexicon, and that all the different interpretations are equally and instantly available when we encounter one of these polysemic words. A challenge to this theory, however, becomes apparent in co-predication tests. In co-predication, we combine two different interpretations into a single sentence. Like, for example, the school was on fire when it called Tom's parents, or they took the door off its hinges and walked right through it. So even though the two different interpretations in these sentences are closely related aspects of the same concept, we struggle to unify them into a single interpretation and make the sentence work. So a more recent hypothesis to explain this observation is that the representation of polysemic senses is in fact more hierarchical, and that there is some degree of sense clustering or distance-based grouping to explain for this behavior. So a central question for my research project has been to figure out whether there are indeed any measurable distances between polysemic word sense interpretations, and whether we can predict these distances through computational tools to provide a more cost-effective way to investigate this phenomenon. In order to answer the first question, in the past few years we have collected close to 20,000 judgments through crowdsourcing on Amazon Mechanical Turk, asking annotators to rate the explicit similarity in sentence pairs that use the same polysemic target but with different interpretations, or rating the acceptability of a co-predication structure that invokes different interpretations of a polyseme. What we have observed, and what was to be expected, is that most combinations are rated to be highly similar, which we can see on the right-hand side of this distribution. So most pairs of sense interpretations are rated to be closely to identity of sense, or near identical in sense. We do, however, also observe this long tail in this little bump on the left-hand side of the distribution, which indicates that for some pairs of interpretations, ratings are very low, and similarity is perceived to be very low. And that is more resembling homonymy, which is a phenomenon that two different, completely unrelated meanings are invoked just by coincidence through the same word form. So we see in this distribution that apparently there is some kind of distance playing a role in the similarity of polysemic interpretations, and that a completely unspecified representation can probably not explain for this behavior. Distances between word sense interpretations, however, become even more clear if we look at specific target words, like for example here, newspaper. In our study, newspaper was assumed to have three different interpretations: the publisher of a newspaper, the physical object, and the information contained within the physical object. If we plot the different similarity ratings of these senses against each other, like in this heat map on the top right, we see that, for example, senses 2 and 3 are more closely related to each other than, for example, sense 1 and 2. What is even more interesting is that if we look at target words that allow for the same set of sense interpretations, like for example in this case magazine, we observe a very similar distribution of sense similarity ratings, and we see these patterns throughout some types of alternations that we have tested. So there seems to be some kind of consistent patterns of word sense similarity in at least the set of metonymic regular polysemic targets that we have investigated in our study. Looking at computational tools, and especially contextualized language models, we see that, for example, here BERT large performs much better than a more static baseline of word2vec in predicting the similarity of word sense pairs, and they are clearly capable to distinguish polysemes from homonyms in different homonym interpretations. All in all, the correlation between BERT-large predictions and our human annotations is up to 0.7. If we look at the similarity patterns, however, that we observed in the human judgments, we find that BERT-large struggles to replicate them consistently. If we however look at a clustering of word senses just based on the BERT embeddings, we find that this works quite well for some types of alternations. So if you have a look here at the word magazine on the right, you see that all the different senses 1, 2, 3, and 4 are clearly separated, and that senses 1 and 3 are grouped closer to each other than, for example, senses 2 and 4. So it seems that BERT embeddings include some kind of representation of polysemic word sense, and that probably this information can be used in downstream tasks, but at least off the shelf, they might not represent exactly how we as humans interpret these lexical ambiguous words. We think that there should be more research in this, and we're definitely looking forward to your questions about this, but for now, this has been my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Goodbye.